Welcome, everyone, to today's Better Way Thursday workshop. We're so excited to be here. We're kicking off a new season. We're doing these a little bit of a different style now. We're doing these more webinar style, just so we fit everybody's schedules a little bit better. But we'll have some fantastic topics, and we still want you to connect with our guest speakers. They all are eager to meet with you and talk to you and get to know you as well. And so I'm sure Emily will have some contact info and a way to reach out to her. So today we have Emily Burnett, who is the founder of Moso Money, and she is also works in the tech industry. She is a webmaster and has some interesting career background, and she'll tell you a little bit about that. You all know that I hate reading long bios. I think they're super boring, so I will let Emily introduce herself. But we're excited to have her here today. And today, the topic that we're going to be talking about is feeling awesome about your money. And that is a perfect topic at the beginning of the year. We all maybe stretch ourselves a little bit thin around the holidays, and it's a wonderful time to get perspective and look at how we can make better choices about our money. And so I'm going to just turn things over to Emily now, and I'll be hopping into some questions throughout the presentation. But in the meantime, mostly, Emily, take it away.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Robin. And it is so exciting to be here. I, excuse me, have really looked forward to talking with this particular group because you're doing what I did, I think about 8 years ago, and it's been such a powerful choice in my life. And then the other thing I feel really strongly about is money. And so I love talking with women about money. And I will give you my introduction and my bio. And I share nuggets along the way of sharing my bio. So I want to start with how I entered technology because I feel like that's relevant to you and it's relevant to my money journey that can hopefully inspire you for what's ahead of you and what's possible, kind of in both of those aspects. So it was about 9 years ago that I was working a good job, but there weren't a lot of options for growth in that job. And my dad sent me a link to an article about web development boot camps. And less than a month later, I had quit my good job, put the tuition of the course on my credit card, and moved to the Bay Area, where I did an immersive web development boot camp. And that has launched kind of my journey into tech and through tech. And again, it's been such a powerful choice for my life and for my career options. But the other part of my story is my money. And I mentioned that I'd put the tuition for the program on my credit card. I'd put so many other things on my credit card. And at my peak, excuse me, I had $50,000 in debt. And you can imagine that weighed heavy. You know, I was on the hook for over $1,100 a month in debt payments. And entering tech did wonderful things for my income and my income potential, but it didn't magically fix everything. And you know, I had made a lot of money, quote unquote, mistakes, although I'm grateful now for all of my money journey because it's given me the heart to talk with especially women about how we can feel capable and confident and excited about money. And I'm not talking about like investments and tax strategies and things like that that are worth talking about. That's just not my expertise. And I have found personally that I am able to do a lot bigger and better things with my money by managing my entry-level money, my monthly money. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today. Because women, especially, if you're like me, you know, I paid bills. I was in a lot of ways responsible, but I was kind of embarrassed about my debt. I was embarrassed about my spending. I didn't want to talk to experts with credentials about my money. I just felt guilty. I felt guilty anytime I heard someone use the word budgeting. And so the hope is out of this presentation today that through my story and through what I share with you, you also can get excited about managing your money. So I have worked as a coach, and I've coached individuals ranging from single parents to grad students to um, probably like the top outlier client spent, not made, but spent $750,000 in a year. And the crazy thing about that kind of spectrum of incomes that I have coached is that the emotions were all the same. The only thing that changed was like zeros and commas. And I share that because everybody's financial circumstances this moment are different, but that everybody can be benefited and blessed by taking care of what they have right now and organizing it so that as more money comes into the system, you get to be more intentional about what you choose to do with that money. And when I talk about taking care of money, I am not talking about, living on the cheap and being super frugal and never having any fun, because those are some of the things that I thought about when I heard the word budget. And when I talk with people about what I do, I do hear people, or I see it in their countenance, or I hear it in their voice when I mention budgeting. Their shoulders kind of slump. They just take on this whole demeanor of like, yeah, that's something I should do. Or they just feel guilty, and I can see that guilt or hear that guilt, or they'll tell me about it. And the type of money management I teach and espouse and live myself doesn't involve any of that. I mentioned earlier that at my apex of debt, I went through this boot camp and came out, and I had a web development internship that turned into a full-time position. And within, excuse me, I want to say 8 months of going to boot camp, I was making more than I had left at my previous job, salaried job, which is exciting. And I continued to make more money, and yet things didn't feel much more comfortable. And my wake-up call was when I realized I make too much money to feel this broke. That was a very real feeling for me. And then I decided to figure out what I needed to do differently, and think differently. And for the first time, it didn't come from like a place of scarcity or I should, and it's going to be terrible. It came from, there's so much possible for me if and as I do money differently. So I'll continue to share my story, because I think there are things along the way that may inspire you to, open yourself up to not feeling guilty or ashamed about money. And it's really exciting that more money is coming your way. And I found in my own life that more money came my way because, this is just my analogy, that like, it knew it was coming to a good home. It knew that it was coming to a home where it wouldn't just get lost in the couch cushions, or, I'd accidentally spend the utilities money on the birthday gift for a niece or nephew. So the spoiler alert of my money story is that I had this wake-up call of I've got $50,000 in debt. And I felt like I would have that debt forever. I'm single, and I didn't want to take that into a relationship. I didn't want to put that on anybody else to pay off, but it also didn't feel possible for me to pay off, given that when I put my numbers on paper, I could see why I was stressed. And that's because despite a healthy income, my spending, including that $1,100+ going toward debt, exceeded my income. So no wonder I was stressed. In that aha moment wake up call, I mapped it out very realistically and saw that I could become debt free in 3.5 years, which was really exciting. And the spoiler alert, this is where it all ends, but I will be getting into some very specific steps that I would love to share with you. I mapped it out for 3.5 years, which was so exciting to see that on paper. And then I paid it off and became consumer debt free in less than 2. And that goes back to the money where, it really did just feel like money was coming my way. And I like to think that it was because it knew it would be appreciated and well taken care of by coming to me. And I did all of that without living miserably. I still went out to eat with friends. I still shopped sometimes. I went on trips and I enjoyed it all so much more than I had before when I was living either on a faux budget or not budgeting at all. Because that was really a big part of my journey. And I would, have you ask yourself, what does your current relationship with money look like? That's a important question to think through and entertain without judgment. If you're in kind of an avoidance state, that's okay. It's good to know that. But just kind of opening yourself up to that you could have a different relationship with money. If you share money with someone else and you're sharing finances, what's that dynamic like? Are you fully participating in it, or is there an element of kind of not wanting to see what's under the bed? Even though I was and have only been responsible for my own money, I can very much relate to just not wanting to look at what's under the bed. So as you consider those questions, where are you, what are your current feelings? What's your relationship with money? What's the relationship with a partner if you're sharing money? I'd love to share some specific things, some of which I've already alluded to, but these are the really key things I would recommend you consider in this new year, because this can be the year that you are different with money and get different results and kind of prepare a really healthy foundation for your financial picture, which is really the thing that will enable even more of your hopes and dreams. So, and just to reiterate, this is the money we all have. It's the money that comes in monthly, and even if the amounts are different, we all have money coming in, we all have money going out. And this is not a lecture on how to live cheap or shop discount. You might choose to do those things, but this also isn't a presentation on how much you should be spending on categories, because everybody has different situations and different financial pictures. So it's if you've ever organized a closet, it's a lot like that. It's organizing your money based on what you need it to do, and then keeping it organized. So I would love to move into these. I think I broke it down into four things that will, these are what I did that really have changed my life, and I've seen them change the lives of those I've coached. And these are the things that you can really start immediately. You don't even have to wait for a new month. You can start today. And this is kind of the path to having financial peace now and being able to enjoy your present money as well as money coming to you in the future. So the very first, excuse me, the very first step, if you will, is to start where you are. And this is really powerful in a lot of aspects of life, but especially with money, it is really helpful to literally accept all of the numbers in your life right now and make peace with your financial reality. And how you do that is getting everything on paper. And I'm talking like old fashioned pen and paper. If you're very, very, if you just love spreadsheets, which I actually do, and I still recommend pen and paper, there's an element of getting it very analog that I feel like I can interact with it more concretely. And you can scribble, you can adjust things, you can circle things, you can star things. And that's where my financial transformation started, was I got everything on paper. I'll pivot for a second and tell you about a client I worked with. I'll call her Liesel. And she was a single mom, and she had been budgeting on a financial platform for years. And she was doing her very best to pay all the bills, do, some fun things with her family, excuse me, and really keep afloat financially. She would hide money in Venmo from herself, hoping that she kind of had these rainy day funds, and that she found herself dipping into them often. She would put money in savings, and then she would need to take it out to cover emergencies. She got cash back from the store or for gifts, she would kind of stash that. And she just felt like she couldn't quite get ahead, and that every month it was a little bit of a game to piece together. And it was really dissatisfying for her to have to empty Venmo and her cash stashes and a savings account that was supposed to be her savings not to touch. And again, the result was that she kind of beat herself up because she felt like she should be able to afford her life and that she was budgeting. But the piece that was missing was that she had not taken, all those amounts that we store in our heads. She hadn't taken those from her head and put them on paper. And so as we worked together, she would list out all of her things and say, yeah, that should be it. And then I would ask additional questions. What about this? What about this category? What about this category? What about this annual thing that comes up? What about car stuff that new tires? You have new tires now, or you have newer tires, but you will need tires in a year or two. And when she put everything on paper, and again, it took some time and some rounds of that to just dig, and to put amounts on them that were realistic and not underinflated, she could see very clearly, okay, this is why I am financially stressed. And it wasn't, oh, yes, Robin. Okay. Sorry to interrupt, and you're on mute.
No, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think, I'm good now. I'm not muted now, right? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
So talking about Liesel and thinking about that and getting everything down on paper, I know that sometimes, as you were mentioning, that we can forget things, that we're having a hard time keeping track of everything. Are there steps that you would follow, or resources? Like, are there online sheets that we can go find that says, oh, don't forget about this, don't forget about this? Like, if we're taking that first step to really get everything down, how do we make sure that we remember everything that we need to remember?
That's a really, really good question. And I think there are resources, and I will actually share with you, Robin, after this. I believe I have written at least one blog post about recommendations for, what about this? What about this? I would start with the big stuff. I'd start with the things you pay to put a roof over your head, and, all the monthly bills. And then I would add the fun stuff. And that's probably where you're going to benefit the most by getting real. Because I would say things like, well, I know I shouldn't go out to eat, so I'm going to say I don't go out to eat. And then I would still go out to eat and end up needing to cover that overspending with utilities money. And so I think the fun stuff is where you really gain the most and where you can really accept this is my current reality. You might not, it may not match up with what you've been telling yourself, which, I told myself for years, like, well, I really never go shopping and I never go out to eat. And I live so frugally. But then when I really looked at numbers and would say, okay, not wishful thinking, how much do I spend on eating out or pretending like I don't? How much do I spend? Okay. And accepting that number, because you can't change something you haven't accepted. And that's what I've been trying to do. I was trying to change before I'd even looked under the bed, before I made peace with what I was actually spending. So the fun stuff, and then the generous stuff, like gifts for family, friends, coworkers, friends of coworkers. It's amazing how often we get kind of positively influenced into being generous. But if we don't have that money and the being generous ends up shortchanging our mortgage payment or something to that effect, it's probably not worth. You can find other ways to be generous, more intentional ways to be generous. I would think about annual expenses that, like Amazon Prime, that yearly membership. I think it's now about $11 a month, which adds up. And if you don't plan for it monthly, that can be an unwelcome surprise. Car things, trips. So it kind of requires you to look at all facets of your life, look at kid expenses. And that is one of the things that my friend Liesel found is that she was maybe underestimating how much her kids cost her for their just fun things. They'd go to the dollar store or a craft store. I need supplies for this. I need supplies for that. And those sorts of things were not getting captured in her financial picture. And so I would just encourage, in addition to some of the questions that I've asked and any others that I will surface up to Robin, I would just keep asking yourself, what else? What else? And you might ask yourself, what stressed me out last year? What expenses were unwelcome surprises? So, just keep asking what else, and especially the annual things that you can make monthly. That's a huge gain, because it reduces the number of larger ticket annual expenses that will come up, like they have in the past. I also would, again, don't underestimate amounts. So this is the step where you actually want to kind of round up. If you're not sure how much you're spending per month on groceries, guess, and then maybe pad it a little bit, as much as your financial circumstances. And so you'll just want to round up. This is not the step where you want to round down and hope that it's only that amount. This was really critical for me. And when I had it all down on paper, and all is relative, there were things that still came up, but if you can cover and get out on paper 90 to 95% of the spending that happens in your life monthly and annually, it's really powerful. So once you have everything on paper and you've kind of accepted it, again, you might choose to make changes as you continue down this road, but accepting it and seeing it for what it is, it will provide answers. And, you may now see clearly for the first time why you've been stressed financially. The next step is to focus on one priority at a time. So this was really helpful I'll use Liesel again as an example. She was trying to do a lot of good things. She was trying to pay down multiple different forms and types of debt all at the same time. She was trying to do multiple different forms of savings. And she was also juggling multiple credit cards for points, and her financial picture was just complicated. It was a lot to keep track of. And I can relate to this myself, and I see it with almost every client I work with, that they're trying to do all the good things, trying to invest, save, pay off all the debt in their life. And it was tremendously clarifying and helpful to pick one. And of course, if you have multiple forms of debt, you want to pay minimum payments on all of them. But if you're going to pay down debt, pick one. In my case, I picked my smallest credit card. And I didn't look at interest rates, and there are various, schools of thought around this. For me personally, and what I've seen with clients, it's really exciting to get a win under your belt. It's really exciting to see one of those things go away and be able to check it off the list and then roll that payment into the next smallest debt payment. One thing I see with clients that I've worked with is they're trying to save money while they're spending, or while their income is not even covering their spending. And that's largely because they haven't, embraced reality, and they haven't figured out what they truly need to live month to month. They haven't figured out how much their life really costs. And so savings at that point is just something that they'll be dipping into. And that feels really demoralizing, because then you feel like you're a terrible person and you are terrible at saving and you're terrible with money. But once you make peace with your actual spending and figure out how much you really need to live on, then you can use the extra, if there is extra, toward paying off debt or savings. In my case, I did follow the Dave Ramsey system, which was first to save a cash buffer. And that kind of became my new credit card. And so I had this $1,000 cash buffer that was meant to kind of be the flex between what I had surfaced in my new plan, and the things that came up that I couldn't have foreseen, or that the amounts were more than I foresaw. And that became my first good thing to focus on. And then once that was set in place, then I picked my next priority, which was to pay off debt. And not all of my debt. It was minimum payments on everything except the one that was my number one priority. And as I say this, if you're still warming up to the idea of budgeting, some of you may be absolute budget pros, and some of you may actually be by nature frugal. And if so, I absolutely applaud that and don't recommend you, change radically to become a spender. But for a lot of women, I find that we kind of shy away from the thing that sounds frugal, or, that was my perspective on budgeting, was that it was going to ruin my life. And I just want to make the point that as I went down my journey, and literally every client I've worked with who has been successful, I haven't all, because some of them were not willing yet to really fully embrace what was possible for them. But everybody who has been successful at this, they chose what to focus on. They chose, and they were exciting choices. They weren't drudgery or I should do this and it's going to be so hard, but I'm still going to do it. There was excitement and motivation behind it because of where you could see it leading. So that's number two. So just to recap briefly, number one is start where you are, make peace with reality, and get it all on paper. Number two is focus on one good thing at a time and stop trying to do all the good things at once. Okay, and number three is get a system that works. this was so helpful. I had tried several budgeting apps and financial organizational tools. I had used Mint, I had used Ace Money, I had used my own several versions of spreadsheets. And what I found in those experiences and what I have seen in a lot of clients is a lot of those are reactive or they're hypothetical. And so when I was using spreadsheets, I would say, okay, well, here's how much I make per month. And then, my rent is this much and my car payment is this much. And I would whittle down my income and say, okay, so I've got $200 extra a month or whatever. I can put that in savings. And then I would just live out the month, but my money wasn't organized. I might say, okay, and then I'll spend $250 a month on groceries. But then I wouldn't keep track throughout the month how much I was really spending on groceries. And it was just kind of this, at the end of the month, I would do damage control, look at my dwindling checking account balance or my overdrafted checking account balance and, feel guilty and beat myself up and then resolve to live frugally the next month. And that didn't work. It wasn't very fun and it didn't work. So, there are so many things to keep track of in our brains, and we all do. We keep track of, the personal details about the people in our lives and the things we need to be doing. And if you can get this one category out of your head and into a system that keeps your money organized, it will change your relationship and your results with money. And the system I teach, use, love, recommend, I'm in no way affiliated with them, but it is a budgeting app called You Need a Budget. And it's like a digital envelope system that allows you to take those numbers out of your head and say, okay, of the current money I have, I am going to spend $200 of that on groceries. So you put it in a digital envelope in a category, and you do that with each of the things that you need to have money for before you get new money. And then it stays safe from other jobs. So as you are spending, you confidently know that you're spending only grocery money. And if you overspend grocery money, you get to fix that overspending right there, as opposed to waiting till the end of the month and figuring out where you went wrong and, resolve to be better the next month and spend nothing. And so that system of organization, I cannot stress it enough that for anybody who has felt bad about themselves with money for a long time, it's very likely been your system or lack thereof and not you that's been the problem. And that was really a helpful thing for me to realize that I can absolutely be the boss of my finances. I just needed a tool that would help me stay organized, because I love organizing and I love planning. And this is what YNAB, You Need a Budget, allowed me to do. So that's step 3, get a system that works. In addition to that actual budgeting tool or app, and there are others, you may have one you love, or a family member may recommend one that they love. But the critical piece is that it's a zero-based budgeting. So every dollar you have to your name right now needs a job, it needs a home, so that it doesn't accidentally get spent for something else. So I would just make that strong recommendation for any tool you're considering using. And then in addition to that, I do use a spreadsheet where I keep track of future income, and I allocate it, but I'm not actually allocating it, because until that money's in my account, it's all hypothetical. So what you need is, you can use a hypothetical tool like I do, which is kind of exciting to see where I'll be in 7 months. And I can kind of make those adjustments like, oh, this big trip is coming up. And so I am going to allocate money a little bit more over the next couple months so that I have X balance in that category by at such and such time. So that's like the hypothetical fun planning part. And then the other piece is the actual. Take your dollars today, and it's like putting them in stacks with a sticky note. And then when you spend, you take it out of that stack. All right. The fourth thing is a financial map. And this is what I had put on paper when I underwent my financial transformation. I mapped it out like, here I am today. My next milestone is to pay off this credit, well, is to have $1,000 in savings by this day. And then my next financial goal is to pay off this credit card. And if I make these payments per month, it will be gone by such and such a day. And so it really was like step-by-step directions. If you remember MapQuest, I think that was the tool we all used a while ago that, did really the step-by-step directions that you would print out. It served as my own physical version of MapQuest. And what was exciting about it is that it kind of gave me a goal line to try to beat or exceed. And it gave me satisfaction twice. It gave me satisfaction to see, okay, if I do this reasonable thing based on the reality of my financial picture, I can have this in savings and I can have that debt gone by this time. And that was so exciting to see, and then even more exciting to hit. And giving yourself those financial map, those steps to where you want to go. Maybe it's buying a house on your own, or paying off a car, or taking your family on a big trip, or paying off student loans, whatever it is that you want to do and accomplish beyond just cover the expenses of daily and monthly life, you get to plan this map out for it. And that's when you give yourself a reason to live within the budget you have decided to. And you see that living by that budget, which again, you've agreed to, and it doesn't mean that there's deprivation involved, but it still gives you an additional reason to live by that so that you can start actually achieving some of these dreams you've had for your life. And some of these might be dreams you haven't even entertained yet. And they may become more possible. They will become more possible to even entertain and then make a reality as you get your money on purpose. I would love to pause at this point and see if Robin has any questions. And then I can certainly share resources that are available on my website that I'd love to share with you and how to connect with me.
Oh, thank you so much. I was taking lots of great notes. And so I do have a couple questions for you. First of all, when we're back at the early stages, that very first step, when you said you had like this wake up call, realized a large amount of debt, having to make, and then getting everything down and coming to peace. Like, what does it take to really, I mean, this is like any major challenge we have. Like sometimes we think, okay, I have to hit rock bottom before I really make a change. But what does it take for us to truly be honest with ourselves and recognize that something needs to be different, that the pathway we're on is not sustainable, and that we need to change something in order to be free from that stress?
Yeah, that's a good question. And everybody's timeline is a little bit different. And it's not like I went from total financial disaster to like literally one day. I think it was a few months of like, well, several months, honestly, of just realizing, and there was a breakup involved. I was dating a guy, and it was looking serious, and there were a lot of things about the life we pictured together that I was really excited about. And then when we broke up, it was kind of like, well, there goes the relationship and those dreams. And I'm not recommending that you like sign up for a breakup or some major life existential crisis. But I do think that those things kind of come to all of us. And sometimes it's just like the lack of something happening in your life. Where you think, I'm tired of waiting. And so in my case, that was, the months of feeling dissatisfied, like I do make too much to feel this tight, and maybe I can just adjust this. And then, I did have my day where I was like, no, I do make too much to feel this broke. And no one's going to make my dreams come true but me. And so that was my journey. As far as what you can actually do, I do think that entertaining these questions and like really looking at your thoughts with money and your thoughts about yourself with money, like money might be one of the areas in which you're beating yourself up the most. I'm bad with money is such a common phrase. I'm just so terrible with money, or I'm just like such a spender. And like kind of sitting with that thought and like, are you bad with money? What else have you felt bad with that you've actually learned to overcome? When I was in my web dev boot camp, I felt so dumb. And the fact that I like plowed through and have carved out a really successful career in technology is something that I can look not even back on because I live it daily. Like I figure stuff out. And so in my Empowered Money Handbook, which is a freebie on my site, I outline these might be some of your current thoughts. Can you kind of soften some of those and try on some new thoughts? Like trying on shoes. Could you try on the thought, I figured stuff out before? And like you don't have to go right from like, I'm terrible with money, like I'm a genius and I take such good care of my money. Because if that's not the case, you're not going to believe it. So that's my response to that.
Well, and I love the idea of using an analogy to recognize there was another time, another place in my life where I thought I couldn't do something and I realized that I could. Can I transfer that same belief and even the same pattern or steps that I took to something new, this area where I'm struggling right now? I love that.
Cool.
I loved a couple of the questions that you asked too, to identify the challenges that you had. What stressed me out last year about money and what were unwelcome surprises? I love those questions. I think they're really insightful in terms of getting deep down and recognizing, that there might be areas, there are some non-negotiables in our life. There are things where, we have to have a place to live. We have to have food to eat. We have to pay our taxes, all those things.
Yes.
But other areas, there might be some that you feel really great about and others that really stress you out where you're spending money. And that gives you some wiggle room to say, these places where I spent money, I felt great about it. And this place, I recognized it wasn't really what I needed to do. And it wasn't gearing me where I wanted to be. So I thought those were questions that really opened up some good introspection in that area.
Well, as you were just talking about that made me think it's very likely, and I've seen it, that some of those listening are feeling like they are categorically terrible with money because they get derailed by these unexpected surprises or, unwanted surprises. So as you look at the facts, you might realize like, actually, no, I'm pretty good in general. It's just these few things that I could plan better for that would avoid the derailing that's happening and the subsequent, beating yourself up for being terrible with money. Maybe there's just a few areas where you need a little bit more planning.
Yeah, I love that. So one last big question, and this is kind of a big one because we do have some of the women in our community, their money is super, super tight. They're very low income. They're coming out of tough circumstances. And, it's one thing to hear people talk about, well, you cut down on your eating out, you cut down on these other things. And they're like, literally, I'm not fooling myself. I don't do that because I really can't. And sometimes I think you face this yourself. It comes down to, I need to get myself in a position where my income is greater. Yeah. I cannot budget myself out of these problems. I need to expand my income. How did you get to that decision to make a big transition? And there was a big investment for you as well to say, this gives me much greater earning potential. And what would you recommend to women who are looking at that step as well as they try to anticipate doing something that feels like a big, scary step?
Yeah. Well, I would first say, like, my heart goes out to women in that situation because I think that because I had credit cards, that was like my buffer between like the reality. And so if there's, someone listening to this who is, barely making ends meet and they're not turning to debt to cover the eating out and the, shopping, I like totally applaud you because I think that's why my financial mess lasted so long is because I just kind of pretended like it wasn't as tight and I would just put stuff on credit cards. And that's why I ended up with $50,000 in debt. I will say that, as they consider, and they're making a big investment in themselves already, by doing something that is big and new and learning a new skill. And as they consider kind of next steps, I would say don't do what I did, which was take those big steps with no plan. Because I funded a lot of business ideas. I funded a lot of kind of self-enrichment sort of things in my 20s with debt and no plan to pay it off. And so I put like shackles on my future. And so however you do choose to, make those big steps financially, no matter how you do, work out the logistics of a big next step, I would just be realistic about what that means for you down the road in a year. Because I would say like, yeah, I'm just gonna empty my retirement. And that was my plan. And then that ran out and or put it on a credit card. But I didn't think down the road of, well, how am I going to pay an extra couple $100 a month? So make a plan. It's amazing what you can do when you look at the facts of a situation, all that you can get. There are some unknowns, but all the facts you can get. And that is kind of like shining the flashlight under the bed to see what's making the noise. And you realize it's not something super scary. And it's doing that in advance so that you don't end up painting yourself into a corner that is even harder than your present situation. I hope that answers that question.
It does. And I think that's a great place for us to kind of segue a little bit into the next steps for us, just for the tech moms who are watching this. Just know that we are here to help you make plans. We are here to help you find the ways to make these investments in yourself, to start taking some of these courses and other things like that in a way that's going to be manageable and sustainable for you. But the idea that one of the steps toward feeling awesome about our money is finding ways to increase our earning potential today and further down the road. And that's why those investments can be so great. And I think you're probably not sorry that you made that investment in yourself and transitioned something new, but making sure that you're doing it in a way that is the best way that you can do it, in a way that's deliberate and intentional, I think is a great advice. So Emily, thank you so much. Tell us a little bit more about how we can connect with you and learn more about your resources and what you have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on my website, Moso Money. That's MOSO money.com. Moso is a bamboo. And I think this is true of all bamboos, that it grows so slowly at first. And then once it hits, a couple feet, it grows like inches a day and you can see their growth, which I love in like the money aspect for sure, as well as, this tech world. And when you invest in your career skills, that like your potential just can become exponentially realized. So yes, my website is mosomoney.com and I'm on Instagram, not all the time, but you can DM me there. It's moso_money. You're also welcome to send me emails through my site. They come to emily@mosomoney.com. And I joke with family members and friends that budgeting calls are the ones I will take at like 2 a.m. in the morning, which means a lot because I love my sleep. But I love helping somebody who is invested enough in changing their money life to ask a question. And so truly, if you email me, I would be happy to help, anybody who's listening to this. And I would recommend strongly that they take advantage of the freebie on my website, the Empowered Money Handbook. That's really a critical, kind of back to a question you asked a little bit earlier, which is, how do we make that shift? How do we And so it walks you through like looking at your existing thoughts and your what you can try on instead, as well as some concrete steps. So I'd recommend those things. And I'd love to connect with anybody who in your community who has listened to this.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much. And we'll keep an eye out as well for those resources that you said you could share with us. And I'll get them on the site along with this video so you can have everything you need to learn from this and make the most out of this presentation. Emily, thank you so much. Everybody, thanks for joining us, and keep an eye out for more Better Way Thursday workshops we'll have coming up soon on a lot of different topics to get you moving on this great journey that you're taking as tech moms. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.